The gentle hum of laptop keys mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee as Maya Richardson sat in her usual corner at the Night Owl Cafe. Her dedication to perfectionism had kept her there until 11:45 p.m., polishing the final scene of her latest episode. The cafe's owner, Mrs. Chen, occasionally glanced her way with a knowing smile, having witnessed countless nights of Maya's writing marathons over the past 3 years. "Just submitted," Maya announced triumphantly, closing her laptop. Mrs. Chen responded by sliding a fresh cup of chamomile tea across the counter, her traditional celebration gesture for Maya's writing victories. "This one feels special," Maya said, gathering her things. "The network executives are going to love it." She tucked her laptop into her weathered leather messenger bag, a graduation gift from her grandmother who'd always encouraged her storytelling dreams. The spring night air felt crisp against her face as Maya walked to her car, parked beneath a flickering street lamp. Her silver Prius, though modest, represented years of saving from her early days of writing advertising copy. She checked her phone, 11:52 p.m. Perfect timing to get home and finally get some rest. The streets of Los Angeles were quieter now, with only the occasional car passing by. Maya hummed along to Stevie Wonder's "Isn't She Lovely" playing softly on her car radio, thinking about the character arcs she'd just completed. The screenplay had taken an unexpected turn, but those were often the best kinds of stories. Red and blue lights suddenly flooded her rearview mirror. Maya's heart skipped a beat, but she remained calm, following the protocol her parents had drilled into her since she first got her license. She signaled, pulled over smoothly, turned off the engine, and placed her hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. The music continued to play softly in the background. The officer approached, flashlight beam dancing across her side mirror. Maya noticed his name tag under the harsh light. Officer Roberts. License, registration, and insurance, he stated flatly, without greeting. Maya responded with a warm, professional tone. "Good evening, officer. Of course, I'll get those for you. I'm going to reach for my bag in the passenger seat, okay?" She moved deliberately, retrieving her documents. The insurance card and license were easy to find in her organized wallet, but as she reached for the registration in her glove compartment, her stomach tightened. She'd meant to handle the renewal last week, but the screenplay deadline had consumed her attention. "Ma'am, are you aware your registration expired last month?" Officer Roberts' tone sharpened. "And your left taillight is out." Maya's mind raced. The taillight had been working fine yesterday. "I apologize about the registration, officer. I've been meaning to renew it, but I wasn't aware of any issue with my taillight. Would you mind if I check it?" "That won't be necessary. Step out of the vehicle, please." Maya's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "May I ask why that's needed, officer? I'm happy to comply. I'd just like to understand." Officer Roberts didn't respond directly, instead radioing for backup. Maya glanced at her phone. 12:01 a.m. Her triumphant writing night had taken an unexpected turn, but like any good storyteller, she knew that sometimes the most powerful scenes come from moments of conflict. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that every experience, even the uncomfortable ones, could fuel her art. Little did she know, this particular experience would lead to something far more significant than just another scene in her writing. 2 weeks later, Maya sat in the downtown courthouse, her laptop balanced carefully on her knees. The hard wooden bench was uncomfortable, but she barely noticed, absorbed in observing the scene before her. As a writer, every location was potential story material, and this courthouse was a goldmine of human drama. She'd arrived early for her 10 o'clock a.m. hearing, dressed in a crisp navy blazer and matching slacks. Her agent had scheduled a lunch meeting at noon, but Maya suspected she might need to reschedule. The court schedule on the wall showed 20 cases before hers. "All rise." The bailiff's voice boomed across the room. Judge Gerald Brooks swept in, his black robe flowing behind him. Maya's trained eye noticed the slight scuff on his shoes and the way his reading glasses hung just a touch crooked. These were the kinds of details that make characters feel real to audiences. The judge's reputation preceded him. Maya had done her research, as she did for all her characters. A Yale Law graduate, 20 years on the bench, and known for running an efficient courtroom. The whispers around her painted a picture of a man who prided himself on processing cases quickly. Maya opened her notes app, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she documented the scene. A young mother trying to explain away a parking ticket, an elderly gentleman confused about his traffic violation, a teenager with his father looking terrified about his first offense. Judge Brooks handled each case with mechanical precision, rarely looking up from his papers. "He's been worse since his daughter moved away for college," whispered a clerk to her colleague nearby. Maya's ears perked up. Another detail for her character study. The clerk continued, "Empty nest hit him hard, especially after Mrs. Brooks took that TV executive job in New York." Judge Brooks' gavel cracked sharply. Next case. Maya watched as a businessman in an expensive suit tried to talk his way out of a speeding ticket. The judge cut him off mid-sentence. "The speed limit isn't a suggestion, sir. Fine stands." Next. Her phone buzzed, a text from Netflix about her latest series pitch. Maya smiled, remembering Mrs. Chen's words from the cafe. "Your stories matter because they show people as they really are." She looked up to see Judge Brooks staring in her direction, frowning at her phone use in his courtroom. She tucked it away quickly, but not before noting how his expression had shifted. A law student sitting next to Maya leaned over. "I'm here observing for class. Is your case coming up soon?" "Number 16, Maya replied softly. "And you?" "Just studying his process. Did you know Judge Brooks has one of the highest fine retention rates in the district? Rarely reduces anything." Maya nodded, adding this information to her notes. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, gathering material for her next screenplay while waiting to face her own legal challenge. Her latest series explored themes of perception and prejudice, and this courthouse was offering a masterclass in both. Case number 15. The bailiff called out. Maya saved her notes and closed her laptop. Her heart rate picked up slightly, but her writer's mind stayed active. Whatever happened next would be valuable, either as personal experience or creative material. As she watched the current case wrap up, she couldn't help but wonder how Judge Brooks would react if he knew who she was. Not just another case member, but M.G. Richardson, whose latest streaming series his wife's network was desperately trying to acquire. Case number 16, Richardson Maya. The bailiff's voice echoed through the courtroom, and Maya rose gracefully from her seat. She gathered her belongings, tucking her laptop into her messenger bag before approaching the podium. Judge Brooks glanced at the citation papers, his reading glasses now perfectly straight. The morning light streaming through the high windows caught the silver in his hair, and Maya noticed how his shoulders tensed slightly as he reviewed her case. "Ms. Richardson, you're here for an expired registration and a non-functioning taillight," he stated, looking up briefly. "How do you plead?" Maya squared her shoulders, channeling the confidence she usually reserved for network executive meetings. "Your Honor, I take full responsibility for the expired registration. However, I'd like to provide context about the taillight situation." Judge Brooks's pen paused mid-notation. Something in her tone, perhaps its quiet assurance, made him look up again. Maya maintained eye contact, her expression composed. "I had my car serviced the day before the citation," she continued. "I have the maintenance records showing the lights were checked and functioning properly." She reached into her bag for the documents. "Ms. Richardson," Judge Brooks interrupted, "are you suggesting the officer was mistaken?" "Not at all, Your Honor. I'm simply providing relevant information about the vehicle's condition. I understand the importance of road safety, which is why I maintain regular service records." A subtle murmur rippled through the courtroom. Most defendants simply accepted their fates, but Maya's articulate response seemed to catch everyone's attention. The law student from earlier had stopped taking notes, watching the exchange with newfound interest. Judge Brooks leaned forward slightly. "Your registration was expired by 3 weeks. That's a clear violation." "Yes, Your Honor," Maya agreed. "I was in the middle of a crucial work deadline. While that's not an excuse, I'd like to note that I renewed the registration the morning after receiving the citation. She held up the new registration card. Your work deadline doesn't take precedence over the law, Ms. Richardson. His tone carried a hint of condescension. What exactly is your occupation? Maya smiled slightly. This was the question she'd been anticipating. I'm a writer, Your Honor. A writer, he repeated, his tone suggesting he'd heard every possible excuse. And this deadline was so important that you couldn't spare 30 minutes to renew your registration. The deadline was for a streaming series, Your Honor. The network was waiting. Maya kept her voice steady, knowing the weight her next words carried. But you're absolutely right. I should have managed my time better. Judge Brooks shuffled the papers before him, clearly ready to pronounce judgment. Ms. Richardson, this court sees many creative explanations for straightforward violations. Your articulate presentation doesn't change the facts. The gavel rose in his hand, but Maya remained perfectly poised. In screenwriting, timing was everything, and she knew this moment would be significant later. The total fine is $1,500. This includes $1,000 for the expired registration and $500 for the taillight violation. The gavel fell with a sharp crack. Next case. As Maya turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of Judge Brooks already focusing on the next case file. She allowed herself a small smile, not of satisfaction or resentment, but of recognition. Every story needed its inciting incident, and Judge Brooks had just provided hers with perfect dramatic timing. Walking out of the courtroom, Maya pulled out her phone to reschedule her lunch meeting. The Netflix executives could wait. She had a new scene to write. The sleek conference room at Netflix headquarters buzzed with excitement. Executives leaned forward in their ergonomic chairs, eyes fixed on the large screen where the final episode of Midnight Choices had just finished playing. Maya sat quietly at the end of the table, her face illuminated by her laptop's soft glow as she pretended to check emails. MJ Richardson has done it again, announced creative director Sarah Martinez, breaking the silence. The ratings for this season are through the roof. We're trending #1 in 47 countries. Maya smiled behind her screen, remembering how that courtroom scene she'd written after her traffic court experience had become the season's most talked about moment. She transformed her personal encounter into a powerful story about perception and justice, though none of her colleagues knew its true inspiration. The anonymous creator angle is working brilliantly for publicity, chimed in marketing director James Chen. Social media can't stop speculating about MJ's identity. Some think it's a retired judge, others bet on a former prosecutor. He chuckled, scrolling through Twitter reactions on his tablet. Maya closed her laptop and finally spoke. The story should be bigger than its creator, she said softly. That's why I chose to use my initials. The Hollywood Reporter's latest headline flashed on someone's phone. MJ Richardson's Midnight Choices breaks streaming records. Creator's identity remains television's best-kept secret. Only Maya's agent and a select few Netflix executives knew that the mysterious MJ Richardson was sitting in that very room. The Critics' Choice Awards want to honor you next month, Sarah mentioned, sliding a golden envelope across the table. They're presenting you with the Impact in Television Award. Will you accept it in person? Maya picked up the envelope, her mind already racing. She'd managed to avoid major public appearances so far, sending video acceptances for her previous awards. But this one felt different, more significant. It's time, she decided, surprising everyone in the room. The show's message about looking beyond surface judgments. Maybe it's time to embody that message personally. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen at the Night Owl Cafe. Your usual corner misses you, but I saw the show's final. Worth every late night. Maya smiled, remembering those countless hours of writing, including the night of her traffic stop. Entertainment is reporting that MJ Richardson's streaming deal is worth 9 figures, James announced, still scrolling. The speculation about your identity has only increased interest in the show. Maya stood up, gathering her things. Send me the details for the awards ceremony. I'll be there. She paused at the door, adding with a hint of irony, "I think it's time for some interesting revelations." As she drove home in her now properly registered Prius, Maya reflected on how life had changed since that night with Officer Roberts and her day in Judge Brooks' courtroom. Her series had become a cultural phenomenon, sparking discussions about justice and prejudice across social media platforms. The irony wasn't lost on her. How a moment of feeling powerless had led to her creating one of television's most powerful new voices. She transformed that experience into art, and soon, the very people who had underestimated her would realize just who they'd been dealing with. Maya pulled into her driveway, noticing the latest issue of Variety magazine on her doorstep. The headline read, "M.G. Richardson, the invisible force changing television." Soon, she thought, they'd need to update that headline. The Beverly Hilton's International Ballroom sparkled with Hollywood glamour. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in ivory silk, while carefully arranged centerpieces featured elegant white roses and golden orchids. Judge Gerald Brooks adjusted his bow tie nervously, feeling out of place among the television industry elite. "Darling, relaxed," his wife Jessica whispered, squeezing his hand. As a senior executive at Universal Television, she navigated these events effortlessly. Her burgundy evening gown and confident smile marked her as an industry insider. "This is a huge night for us. M.G. Richardson's team chose our network for their next project." Gerald nodded, sipping his sparkling water. "You've mentioned it a few times tonight," he said, managing a smile. The truth was, he heard little else for weeks. Jessica had been instrumental in securing what the industry called the deal of the decade. "Look, there's Sarah Martinez from Netflix," Jessica pointed out. "She's been MJ's executive producer from the beginning. They say only 5 people know MJ's true identity." Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "And tonight, everyone will finally meet the genius behind Midnight Choices." The ballroom continued filling with Hollywood's most influential figures. Gerald observed them with the same analytical eye he used in his courtroom. He noticed how power dynamics played out in subtle gestures, who commanded attention and who sought it. "The show's courtroom scenes are incredibly authentic," a nearby entertainment lawyer was saying. "MG must have significant legal experience. The attention to procedural detail is remarkable." Jessica beamed with pride. "That's what drew me to the project. It's not just another legal drama. It explores how justice and perception intersect in today's world." Gerald shifted uncomfortably, remembering some of his recent cases. He'd started watching Midnight Choices at Jessica's insistence and found himself surprisingly moved by its portrayal of the legal system. Some scenes had even caused him to reflect on his own courtroom conduct. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host's voice rang out over the sophisticated murmur of conversation. "Please take your seats. The ceremony will begin in 5 minutes." Jessica straightened Gerald's bow tie one last time. "I can't believe we'll finally meet M.J. Richardson. This is like revealing Deep Throat or unmasking Batman," she giggled, giddy with anticipation. The lights dimmed slightly, and a video montage began playing on large screens around the room. Clips from Midnight Choices showcased powerful courtroom scenes, intimate character moments, and compelling storylines that had captivated millions. "The show has transformed how people view justice in America," the narrator's voice announced. "Tonight, we honor not just exceptional storytelling, but a voice that has changed the conversation about equity and perception in our legal system." Gerald watched the screens intently, something nagging at the back of his mind. One scene in particular felt oddly familiar, a judge dismissing a defendant's explanation without really listening. He shifted in his seat, remembering similar moments from his own courtroom. Next up, the host announced, returning to the stage, the moment we've all been waiting for. Please welcome our Impact in Television Award recipient, the creator of Midnight Choices, the remarkable M.J. Richardson. The ballroom erupted in applause. Jessica gripped Gerald's hand tightly, her eyes fixed on the stage. The spotlight beam moved toward the side entrance, and Gerald reached for his water glass, unaware that his entire worldview was about to shift dramatically. The spotlight followed a figure emerging from stage left, and the collective gasp in the ballroom was audible. Maya Richardson glided onto the stage in a stunning silver gown that caught every light in the room. Her natural hair was styled elegantly, and her smile carried the quiet confidence of someone who had waited for this precise moment. Judge Brooks's water glass froze halfway of his lips. Recognition hit him like a physical force. Jessica, still clutching his hand, felt him stiffen but misinterpreted his reaction as simple awe. "Oh my goodness," Jessica whispered excitedly. "She's magnificent. I had no idea Angie was." Her voice trailed off as Maya reached the microphone. "Good evening," Maya began, her voice carrying the same measured tone she'd used in traffic court months ago. "Many of you know me as N.J. Richardson, but tonight I'd like to introduce myself properly. I'm Maya Richardson." The audience hummed on her every word. Camera flashes sparkled throughout the ballroom like stars, capturing this historic moment. Judge Brooks couldn't look away. The defendant from his courtroom was now commanding the attention of Hollywood's elite. "Stories have power," Maya continued, her gaze sweeping the room. "They can change how we see others, and more importantly, how we see ourselves." Midnight Choices began with a simple question. What happens when we look past our first impressions? Jessica was frantically typing on her phone, likely updating her team about this revelation. Judge Brooks barely noticed, his mind replaying his courtroom interaction with Maya in excruciating detail. "Every character in our show has a moment of revelation," Maya went on, a subtle smile playing at her lips. "A moment when they realize their preconceptions have been limiting their understanding of others. I've had such moments myself, some in quite unexpected places like courtrooms." The judge's collar felt suddenly tight. He noticed several heads turn in his direction as Maya's words sparked recognition among the legal professionals in attendance. "The episode that resonated most with our audience," Maya said, "was inspired by a real experience. A traffic court scene where assumptions and authority intersected with identity and truth. That episode won us an Emmy, but its real value was in the conversations it started." She paused, letting the significance settle. In that moment, her eyes found Judge Brooks in the crowd. Their gazes met briefly, but she didn't linger. There was no accusation in her look, only acknowledgement. "I chose to write under my initials because I wanted our stories to stand on their own merit. Tonight, I'm stepping into the light because representation matters. Because somewhere, there's another young writer being underestimated, another voice being dismissed, another story waiting to be told." The applause began before she finished speaking, growing into a standing ovation. Jessica jumped to her feet, tears in her eyes, still unaware of her husband's connection to the brilliant writer she'd admired from afar. Maya held up her award, letting the light catch it. "Thank you for this honor. And thank you to everyone who helped shape this journey, even those who didn't know they were part of the story." As the audience cheered, Judge Brooks remained seated, processing the extraordinary turn of events. The writer whose work his wife had praised daily, whose series had made him question his own behaviors, was the same woman he dismissed so readily in his courtroom. The orchestra began playing, but for Judge Brooks, the only sound was the echo of his own gavel from that day, now a sharp reminder of how quickly he'd judged a book by its cover. The gala's after-party transformed the hotel's garden terrace into an enchanted evening space. Twinkling lights draped between palm trees while soft jazz floated through the air. Maya stood near a fountain, surrounded by an admiring crowd of industry executives, each eager to share how her work had touched them. "The courtroom scene in episode 9 made me call my father," a retired judge, a young producer, was saying. "We had the most amazing conversation about perspective." Jessica Brooks weaved through the crowd, champagne flute in hand, finally reaching Maya. Maya," she beamed. "I can't tell you how honored we are to have you joining Universal. I've been your biggest champion without even knowing who you were." Maya graciously accepted Jessica's warm embrace, her eyes briefly flickering to where Judge Brooks stood at the terrace's edge, looking out over the city lights. He hadn't moved or spoken since the revelation. "Your husband's a judge, isn't he?" Maya asked softly. "I'd love to hear his perspective on the show's legal elements sometime." Jessica brightened. "Gerald, come over here," she called out. But the judge remained distant, lost in thought. "The timing will come," Maya said graciously, turning to greet Martin Scorsese, who'd been waiting patiently to congratulate her. The legendary director had already sent 3 scripts for her consideration. Across the terrace, Netflix executives huddled, likely discussing how they'd missed the signs about MJ's identity. Sarah Martinez caught Maya's eye and raised her glass with a knowing smile. She'd been one of the few who'd known the truth all along. "Maya," called out James Chen, now heading for the terrace with a reporter from Variety, "they'd love a quick word about your next project." She nodded, but first turned to complete her conversation with a young black female writer who'd nervously approached her. "Keep writing," Maya encouraged. "Your voice matters. And remember, sometimes the stories we think might hold us back become our greatest strength." Near the bar, Judge Brooks finally moved, ordering a scotch. He watched as Maya handled each interaction with the same quiet dignity she'd shown in his courtroom. Her success wasn't just in her writing. It was in how she carried herself, how she lifted others up, how she transformed a moment of injustice into inspiration. "She's incredible, isn't she?" Jessica appeared beside him, still glowing with excitement. "Did you know she wrote most of the first season in a small cafe? Can you imagine? Working late nights, probably going unnoticed." The judge's hand tightened around his glass as he remembered Maya mentioning her writing deadline during the traffic court hearing. How quickly he'd dismissed it. Maya was now sharing a laugh with the governor of California, who'd made a surprise appearance after hearing about her revelation. Her silver gown caught the evening light, making her appear to glow as she moved gracefully through the crowd. The next season, Maya was saying to a group of eager listeners, explores how small moments can lead to profound change. How recognition of our own biases can open doors we never knew existed. Judge Brooks watched as his wife joined the group around Maya, completely unaware of the connection between her husband and the brilliant writer she admired. He realized that Maya had given him a precious gift, the chance to learn from his mistake without public humiliation. The evening breeze carried the sound of Maya's warm laughter across the terrace, a sound full of joy rather than judgment, of triumph rather than revenge. 1 month after the gala, Maya sat in her favorite corner at the Night Owl Cafe, reviewing the final edits for her new series. Mrs. Chen placed a fresh cup of green tea beside her laptop, just as she had done countless times before. "Your success hasn't changed your habits," Mrs. Chen smiled. "Still here until closing time." Maya looked up, returning the smile. "Some things shouldn't change. This cafe is where the magic happens." Her phone buzzed. A notification about today's speaking engagement at the Los Angeles County Bar Association. The topic: storytelling and justice, breaking down barriers in the legal system. The irony wasn't lost on her that Judge Brooks would be in attendance, not by choice, but because the panel was mandatory for all county judges. Later that afternoon, Maya stood at the podium in the Grand Conference Hall, facing a sea of legal professionals. Her simple yet elegant black suit was a stark contrast to her gala attire, but she carried the same quiet confidence. "Stories shape our understanding of justice," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Every person who enters a courtroom brings their own narrative, their own truth. The challenge lies in learning to listen." In the third row, Judge Brooks sat straight-backed, his expression thoughtful. Since the gala, his courtroom demeanor had subtly shifted. His colleagues had noticed him taking more time with each case, looking defendants in the eye, listening more carefully to explanations. Recent studies show that snap judgments in our legal system often reflect deeper societal beliefs, Maya continued. But what happens when we pause, when we challenge our initial perceptions? She clicked to the next slide, a scene from Midnight Choices playing silently. It was the courtroom scene inspired by her own experience, but now it served a different purpose. Not as accusation, but as education. This scene resonated with millions, she explained, not because it showed a miscarriage of justice, but because it revealed how easily our preconceptions can blind us to the full story before us. Judge Brooks found himself nodding slightly. He'd watched this episode 7 times since the gala, each viewing revealing new layers of meaning. After the presentation, as attendees mingled over coffee, Maya felt a presence beside her. Judge Brooks stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee from the Night Owl Cafe. Mrs. Chen suggested the hazelnut blend, he said, offering her 1 cup. Maya accepted with a gentle smile. She never forgets a customer's preference. Ms. Richardson, he began, then corrected himself. Maya, your presentation today, it gave me a new perspective on my role as a judge. That's all any storyteller can hope for, she replied. New perspectives. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both understanding that this interaction was its own kind of resolution. Jessica still doesn't know, he said finally, about the traffic court. Maya stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Some stories are better left untold. What matters is the change they inspire. As she gathered her things to leave, Judge Brooks spoke once more. Your new series, will it have any courtroom scenes? Maya paused at the door, a knowing smile playing her lips. Actually, I'm writing a judge character who discovers it's never too late to learn new truths. Would you be interested in consulting? The judge's surprised laugh echoed in the hallway. Sometimes, Maya realized, the best endings weren't about revenge or redemption, but about finding common ground in unexpected places. After all, every great story was really about transformation.